Welcome back to So Money, everybody. I'm Farnoosh. It's Ask Farnoosh Friday. And today we're talking about money and aging parents, the best way to fund a 529 plan. My daughter had a lemonade stand this past weekend with three of her friends, 3 hours, and they earned about $60, give or take. And it was so much fun. They had been wanting to do this all summer long, and finally the weather was good. If you live on the East Coast, you know it's been rain, rain, rain all summer. But last Saturday, it was nice and sunny. And at one point, a neighbor walked up to them and was like, "I'm very impressed, girls. So, what cause are you supporting?" And we all kind of looked at each other, me, Tim, the kids. And my daughter finally spoke up and said, us. We're supporting us. But this was after a friend of hers actually got nervous and said that they were going to support homeless whales, which got a chuckle. But my daughter was just like, "Sir, you seem to be confused. The sign here says thanks for supporting. And by that, I mean us, not thanks for supporting, a charity," which there's nothing wrong with doing that. But this is not what we're doing today. Now, as a parent, I had mixed feelings about this moment because sure, I mean, maybe it would have been right to have them donate somewhere. These girls are very fortunate. Do they need money from a lemonade stand more than a homeless whale? Probably not. But for us, the purpose of this lemonade stand was to have them learn about sales and entrepreneurship, have fun, and talk to people in real life. Be off of an iPad or a TV or any other screen. And I sort of reject the notion that there needs to be like a charity or a cause tied to your sales efforts always. We and these other girls' families, they all teach generosity and the importance of donating in other ways in their households. That being said, there was a part of me that felt like, am I failing at this? Like, is there a missed opportunity here? Should we consider donating some of this money since so many people, neighbors and strangers, had just walked up to them, handed them money, didn't want any lemonade. We also had cookies. They didn't want that. They were like anti-sugar, whatever, get it. And one woman even she was on her way to another neighborhood and she parked in front of our house, came up, gave them $2 and said, "I just love what you're doing. I remember this when I was a kid. I think it's great. Keep it up." So all this generosity they experienced that day. And I thought, should we pay it forward? So I asked the girls, and again, I was met with resistance. But then I thought, what if I sweetened the pot? So they had raised about $60, and I said, what if, and this is still up to you, but what if I offered to match your earnings if you agree to also donate 30% of this to charity or a cause of your choice? And at that point, they were like, yes. So that meant each of them would get $20, and then the rest, which was about $40, would be donated. And they all picked, not the homeless whales, but close, an animal shelter, which is going to now turn into another get together. They're very smart. They scheme, these girls, to figure out when they can hang out again. So they're like, let's go to an animal shelter. Let's bring gifts. Let's call the animal shelter ahead of time, see what they need, and then spend time with the animals. So I was really proud of myself. Proud of them too for saying, yeah, this works for us. So that was our little weekend. Our kids also went to see Spider-Man Brand New Day, which apparently everybody in the world has seen. It crossed $1 billion worldwide in 6 days. It's the second fastest movie ever to do this. But I have to ask, when was the last time you went to see a movie on the big screen? Right now, movie theaters are packed between Spider-Man and the Odyssey. It's a great time to be a movie theater owner. But when you measure U.S. theater attendance against 2019 levels before COVID, we're actually down 27%. Up in July, 8.1% up in July compared to this time in 2025, but down 27% against 2019 levels. Interesting, right? Also in the news, sticking with some news, HOAs are pursuing more foreclosures. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. So HOAs, home associations, are done being patient with unpaid dues. I remember living in Brooklyn, and I believe our HOA had hundreds of thousands, I think $300,000 in unpaid dues. The informal grace periods are disappearing, and delinquent accounts are heading straight to lawyers. No more waiting around hoping people catch up. In the worst cases, that's meant foreclosure. In the first quarter of this year, over 6,300 properties hit some stage of HOA-related foreclosure, from the first default notice all the way to a completed sale. And that's up almost 40% from 2 years ago. And get this, it's outpacing regular mortgage foreclosures. Now, this matters even if you're current on your dues, because HOAs run on pooled money from residents to cover shared spaces and operating costs. The second someone stops paying, everyone else effectively picks up the slack. And dues were not cheap to begin with, right? You got staffing, lawn care, materials, which has all gone up in price lately. Insurance has been brutal as well. Between 2024 and 2025, 91% of community associations saw their master insurance premiums go up. And for 17% of them, the premiums more than doubled. That's according to the Foundation for Community Association Research. And then there's the reserve fund problem, right? Think of it as an HOA's rainy day account. A lot of funds that looked solid back in 2020 have been drained by the soaring cost of big ticket repairs. The rules on how fast an HOA can act, though, it varies by state. Most, though, require 30 to 45 days formal notice before a lien or foreclosure process can begin. And part of what's driving the crackdown, tougher safety standards that were put in place after the 2021 Surfside condo collapse in Florida. Remember that? And so the problem is a lot of older communities have kept the dues artificially low for years, skipping maintenance. So now boards are stuck hitting residents with these massive special assessments to make up for lost time. And it's a big reason dues have been climbing across the board. Next story this week that's pretty big. This might apply to you. More relief is finally landing for a big group of student loan borrowers. An appeals court this week just ruled that the education department must forgive loans for about 170,000 people who say for-profit schools misled them. And that's roughly $23 billion in debt wiped out. This is not a brand new program either. It's an expansion of a settlement that's been working its way through the courts since 2019, and now about 450,000 borrowers total qualify for forgiveness under it. Now, good news for most of these 170,000 borrowers in this group, they don't have to do anything. If you're a class member, meaning you filed a borrower defense claim before June 22nd of 2022, you're entitled to automatic loan discharge. It's a refund of anything you already paid and credit repair, and there's no application needed. If you're a post-class applicant, you filed between June 23rd and November 15th of 2022, the Department of Ed was legally required to decide your case by a court-ordered deadline. You'll know if you're covered. You got to watch your email, check spam also for a notice from no reply at studentaid.gov. If you think you qualify but you haven't gotten anything, email the Project on Predatory Student Lending directly at info@ppsl.org, and include your name, your borrower defense application number, and the date that you applied. All right, let's hit the mailbag. All right, 2 big questions this week. First, what questions to ask your parents as they approach retirement age? And this is, something I actually talked about this week in a webinar, and it's one of the conversations everybody puts off. Nobody wants to be the person who shows up and asks their parents, hey, let's talk about your death and money. But here's the thing, the families who do have these conversations, and there will be more than one, early on, are almost always in better shape than the families who wait for a crisis to force it. So let's talk about how to actually do this and what to be asking our parents. First, reframe the conversation itself. I don't recommend walking in with a spreadsheet or a list of questions and demands. This is not an audit. You're not an accountant or a financial planner. You're their child, but trying to be a little bit more than just their child, right? You're trying to be someone who can step in and help them. You want to frame it as just getting more information so that you can, again, help them. I want to understand your plan so I can support you the way that you would want to be supported. I'll repeat. I want to understand your plans so that I can support you the way that you'd want to be supported. And That's a sentence that could change the whole tone because I think not all parents, but many parents can get defensive when they feel like their independence is being questioned. I mean, think about how hard it is for aging adults to give up their driver's license. As much as it is an inconvenience to give up your driver's license, it's also this reckoning with aging and realizing I'm not as capable to drive in this case than I was 10 years ago or even last year. And so when you're approaching your parents about their money, there could be this mistaken assumption that you don't think that they're capable, but you want to frame it like I'm here to just be a thought partner with you and to be a backup support system for you because we know that life happens. Now, hopefully, they're open to a conversation. At this point, what you want to find out is just the basics. Do your parents or does your parent have a retirement date in mind? Or are they more flexible, more fluid? A lot of people think they'll know it when they feel it, like, I'll just know when I'm ready to retire. A sign will appear. And that's a real answer, but it is worth digging some more. Like, I would ask, what are some income sources that you are counting on in retirement? Social Security, maybe an old pension if they were lucky enough to have one at one point, their retirement accounts, a 401k, an IRA. Maybe they have rental income or they have a small business that they're winding down. You'd be surprised how many adult children have no idea whether their parents have 50,000 or 500,000 saved. And that gap in information is a huge problem later if something does go wrong. And I think it also creates in your mind, the child's mind, maybe a false sense of either security for them or fear for them, right? Then get granular on the monthly number. Mom, dad, what's your budget going to look like once you stop working and you're not earning a paycheck? This is where a lot of people get tripped up because they're thinking in terms of, I'll just spend less once I'm not working. But remember, healthcare costs often go up in retirement, especially in that gap between when someone retires and when Medicare kicks in at 65. If your parent is retiring at 62, that's 3 years of paying for private insurance or COBRA, and that can run many hundreds of dollars a month per person. So ask directly, have you priced this out? Long-term care. That's a conversation you want to have. Nobody wants to have this, but it's the one I would argue matters the most. So asking your parents, do you have long-term care insurance? And if you don't, what's the plan for if in the event one of you needs extended care, whether that's in-home help or a facility? We've done so many episodes on this. I have so many friends with stories. It is genuinely one of the biggest wealth compromising at best, destroying at worst events for a family because long-term care, it's expensive. There's no cheap way to afford long-term care. It is not covered by Medicare beyond a limited window. And if you don't qualify for Medicaid, which is very hard to qualify for, it can drain your savings very quickly. And so even if the answer is we don't know, we haven't figured that out yet, that's useful information because it means you need to start researching options together, whether that's a hybrid life insurance and long-term care policy, or just having a family conversation about what support might look like. Is it that we move in together? Do we have a friend in the family who is really well-versed in Medicaid? Do we work with a local nonprofit agency to kind of work through our options when it comes to government assistance? And then I would say comes the estate and legal side of the conversation. Things you want to nail down. Do you have a will? Where is the will? What's in the will? Do you have a healthcare proxy? Someone who you've designated legally to be able to make healthcare decisions on your behalf in the event that you are incapacitated. An authorized power of attorney, someone who can handle the financial decisions in the event that you are not able to. Do we have those people designated? Where are these documents kept? I always tell people it's not enough to have these documents exist somewhere in a drawer, some drawer. You need to know where they are and ideally have copies or at least know the attorney who drafted them. And again, here is where I've heard a lot of stories of families scrambling during a hospital stay, trying to figure out who's legally allowed to make the decisions because nobody knew where the paperwork was. It was a logistical issue. It was a logistical nightmare. You want to also ask about the debt. Is your mortgage paid off? Is there any other debt, credit cards, a car loan that's going to follow them in retirement? Debt in retirement does change a lot of the math because now you're not just funding a lifestyle, you're funding a lifestyle plus debt service on a fixed income. And don't forget beneficiary designations. This one gets overlooked constantly because we may have thought, well, I've designated beneficiaries in my will, but are those beneficiaries the same as the people on your retirement accounts, on your life insurance policies, and any other financial accounts? Are they up to date? I've seen situations where an ex-spouse is still listed as a beneficiary decades after a divorce simply because nobody thought to update the form. And that will override what is in the estate plan. And that single mistake can undo an entire estate plan. So this is the checklist. One more thing, and this is not to be saved for the last. Maybe it's what you open the conversation with. And you say, what does retirement look like to you? Actually, don't skip this part. You want to go right to the numbers. That's tempting. But the numbers are what serve the life, right? Not the other way around. So do your parents want to travel? Do they want to move closer to family, grandkids? Do they want to downsize? And if they do, when do they want to do that? Where do they want to do that? How? Once you know their vision, then you can be a better thought partner, a strategizer, help them figure out if the financial plan actually supports it. And here's what else I'll say. I know I said I'll say this is the last thing. This is the last thing. But one more thing. If you don't feel like you can figure out the math or want to figure out the math with them, you can bring in a financial expert, a financial professional. And sometimes that's the best investment, of your money, if it's what you're looking to give them, rather than writing them a blank check. Maybe it's initially, I want to help you get things sorted with the help of a professional that I will pay for. And I'll sit in on those meetings and we'll work through this as a team. And you're not going to have this all figured out in one sitting. A, because there's just too much. And B, because if you try, you're going to get overwhelmed and you might give up. So pick a low stakes entry point, something like, hey, where do you keep your important documents? Just so I know in case of an emergency, and let that open the door. These conversations tend to build on themselves once you establish trust. And then again, consider bringing in a financial professional. There are also elder law attorneys. This is not just to get things off your back and make things less stressful for you, but it's to make things more neutral. If things do get complicated or emotional, sometimes it's easier for parents to hear all of this from a professional rather than from their child, even though you might be in your 40s. All right, next question comes from an audience member who has 3 kids, and they're wondering if they should superfund their college savings accounts, their 529 plans, let it ride, or fund slowly over time. All right, this is a great question. It's a great problem to have. And there's no single right answer. It depends, I would say, mostly on your cash flow, your risk tolerance, and your peace of mind. So let's break down these strategies in detail. These, the coast strategy versus the pay monthly strategy to figure out what's best for your family. So let's start with the scenario where you're going to superfund because it sounds appealing on paper. You do this once, you kind of coast, and you never have to worry about making this monthly payment from there on. And typically, superfunding a 529 means front-loading 5 years worth of the annual gift tax exclusion into the account in one lump sum rather than spreading contributions out month by month, year by year. So for 2026, the annual gift tax exclusion is $19,000 per person. So a single parent could contribute up to $95,000 upfront per child. A married couple could contribute up to $190,000 per child, all without touching their lifetime gift and estate tax exemption. With 3 kids, that theoretically means a couple could put in over $500,000 total across the three 529s in one move. The appeal is obviously time in the market. The earlier the money goes in, the more time it has to compound. If you're funding a 529 for a newborn versus funding it gradually over 18 years, that early lump sum has a big head start. And historically, the stock market has returned somewhere between 7 to 10% annually over long periods. And when you're talking about compounding over 18 years, that early capital does a lot of heavy lifting. So this is the let it ride strategy. You put a large sum in early, invest it in at an age-based or growth-oriented portfolio, and then let compounding growth do the work while you shift to funding other priorities. But this is the trade-off. Okay, this is a real trade-off. You're locking up a significant chunk of capital early, and that money is earmarked specifically for qualified education expenses. If life throws you a curveball, if you have an emergency, a job loss, an unexpected expense, that money is not easily accessible without consequences. If you withdraw 529 funds for non-qualified expenses, the earnings portion is subject to income tax plus a 10% penalty, and that can make a huge dent in things. There's also this what if they don't go to college scenario. Now you've got a fully funded 529 that isn't going to be used for tuition. Now, we know that 529s are flexible. You can change the beneficiary to a sibling, a future grandchild, or even yourself if you want to go back to school. And as of the Secure 2.0 Act, you can also roll a limited amount up to $35,000 lifetime into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary, provided that the account has been open for at least 15 years. So it's not a dead end, but it does require some planning and some flexibility. Now, that's option one. The second route is funding your 529 slowly over time. This is what most people do because, frankly, most people don't have that thousands of dollars to front load the 529. This is a more traditional approach. And so this means making regular contributions. You could do it monthly. You could do it as frequently as you want throughout the year or once a year, rather than front loading everything at once. The obvious benefit here is flexibility. You're not locking up a huge sum in one shot. So if your financial situation changes, a job change, a new baby, a home purchase, you have more room to adjust your contributions without feeling like you've made an irreversible decision, right? And it also lets you dollar cost average into the market. So what is this? Why do people love this dollar cost average approach? Instead of putting a lump sum in at a single point in time, which maybe it's a market high, you're spreading your contributions across market ups and downs. And for some people, that reduces the anxiety of what if I invest a huge sum right before a downturn? And you can sleep better at night knowing that you didn't put all your eggs in the basket at that one point in time. The trade-off with slow funding is obviously less time for compounding. And if you're disciplined enough to actually stick with regular contributions over 18 years, you might not end up with as much growth as the super funding strategy would have generated, especially if the markets prove really strong. So what would I actually do with 3 kids? I'd lean towards a hybrid approach. First, before you fund any 529, make sure your own retirement savings and emergency fund are solid. This is the golden rule of college savings. You don't do the college kids plan first before your own financial plan. You can't get a loan for retirement. You can't get a scholarship for retirement. There's no Pell Grant for being 65. I mean, and I say this to every parent who calls in with this question because the instinct to overfund a 529 sometimes comes at the expense of your own financial security. And that's a trade you don't want to make. It's a non-negotiable. Once your own foundation is solid, consider superfunding what you comfortably can without straining your budget or your other financial goals. I mean, I'll give you our example. We didn't exactly do a hybrid approach, but we did turbocharge the 529 recently. So we were doing $500 a month per kid, and we were doing that from pretty much age 0. About a couple years ago, maybe less than a couple years ago, I looked at how much the money had grown. It's okay. I think we'll get to hit our target by the time our kids turn 18. But just in case, whether it's college costs go up exponentially more than they have in, at least in terms of the pattern over the last 10 years, or let's say the market goes and does a nosedive, I want to be able to just do a little bit more if I can. And I can. So I doubled, and now we're paying $1,000 a month towards college. We started this when my son was like 10. My daughter was, I think, 7, 8. So we'll have more than our initial target if things kind of go as they have been. But I'm erring on the side of things not working out as planned. And so what I can do to control the situation is just to contribute more. And also, I'm really hopeful that they go to college. We are talking about it a lot in the house. They know this is something that we are saving for. So if they are super not into it, I want to make sure they have a plan. They can't just like, I don't want to go to college. No, if you don't have anything you want to do, I would rather you do that in college than just wait it out and not get a degree ever and not have a plan. So this hybrid approach initially that I was talking about, maybe it's like you put in, and I'm talking now to our listener, you put in $30,000 or $50,000 up front for each kid when they're young, taking advantage of the extra compounding time. And then you do the smaller amounts monthly, contributing, whatever you think you need to do to get to hit the projected target. Part of the math for figuring out how much to save for college, it comes down to what kind of school you want to fund for. And some parents are like, I want to pay for wherever they want to go fully. And if that means it's $100,000 a year, then that's what I'm saving towards. Then it's like, well, we want to just be able to afford up to a in-state school. If there's a different school they have in mind where the tuition is more than that in-state school, then we have to find a way to kind of cover the difference. My child will figure it out through student loans, scholarships, grants, or working. But this is what we want to contribute. A few more practical tips. Automate your contributions so that the funding is not a decision that you're reliving every month. Check your state's tax benefits before deciding how aggressively to fund a 529 as well, because many states offer a state income tax deduction or credit for contributions, but it's often only up to a certain amount each year. So spreading contributions across multiple years might actually maximize your state tax benefit compared to that giant lump sum one time. And like we did, revisit your strategy periodically, especially as your kids get closer to college age, because the investment allocation should generally get more conservative as college approaches. And a lot of 529s will automatically adjust for that risk as the kid gets closer to the target date. They'll offer target date retirement funds in the 529s, so you're not exposed to a market downturn right before the tuition bill starts coming due. And I guess there's just no wrong answer between superfunding and funding slowly, but it's about, matching the strategy to your cash flow, your risk tolerance. Make sure you protect your own financial house first, and then stay flexible as your family situation evolves. And that's our show, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you back here on Monday when our guest is going to be Anna Homayun, who is actually an academic expert. She's going to be talking about her book, Getting In Is Not Enough, New Blueprint for Success Beyond Grades, Test Scores, and College Admission. But she also talks about how the book is applicable to people in midlife as well, how to pivot, how to keep an open mind, how to stay engaged in your career, especially with so much changing on the tech front. Looking forward to that conversation. Thanks again, and I hope your weekend is so money.